Teachers who regularly get invited to high school reunions. What are the most amazing transformations, common patterns, epic stories, saddest declines, etc. you've seen through the years? A previous student of mine grew up in a horrible home situation. This individual was really smart and I did my best to help them receive many scholarships and grants, and eventually went to an Ivy League school to get away from their abusive home life. They made it big, and I mean big time millionaire. Made their family jealous, but in the end their hard work paid off. It was great to see and I was so proud of what they'd become. That's amazing. Seems like you're a good teacher too, since you cared about that kid's life and helped him out with applications too. You can be proud of yourself too. The dumb fricks that graduated my year of 2001 tried to organize our 10-year reunion in 2010. Class of 2001 represent. My wife and I skipped our 10-year because it was literally a pizza party with an open bar and daycare. I'm not flying back for that. After the reunion there was a big meltdown on the class FB page about how everybody was still in the same cliques as teenagers. None of the actually awesome people showed up. Maybe the 20-year will be better. Used to have this one kid in my art class in senior high who treated it like one of those easy to pass classes. He was a big guy, much bigger than the other students, and he'd use his size and strength to bully other kids, the smaller ones. He was a little bee underneath it all. He would draw guns and crosses in his art book with pseudo-gangster sayings like "live by the gun," "die by the gun," and "frick the police." You get the idea. Come reunion time, which was some 5 years later, he's found a girl who really reined him in and, kind of like a hunter taming a wolf, really turned him into a good man. They had a baby boy, and he's a responsible father and does yoga on the rocks by the beach. Complete 180. I do think he was a good guy underneath it all. He just needed direction from someone who could break down his walls. The valedictorian of my graduating class lost his full ride to state college after 2 quarters because of drinking and drugs. He grew up in a protected and very strict household. Once he left and got exposed to the temptations of life, he didn't know how to handle it. Last I heard he's working odd jobs and is bumming around our hometown. That's something that's been becoming more and more prevalent. Some parents are extremely controlling, set astronomical standards, and don't allow their children to experience failure. That kid probably got A's and B's in his college classes, but thought he was a failure because he didn't achieve 100% in all his classes and thus lost confidence in himself. I sat beside this girl Joni in grade 8. She was so smart and really pretty. She would always finish the year with like 95 averages, even as high as 98 in some subjects. I was a hooligan, that's why I was seated next to her. She would help me with stuff, always let me copy her homework, peek at tests. There's no way I would have passed without her. The teacher would always say you'll never get anywhere if you just copy Joni all the time. She works the drive-thru at A&W now. Has a herd of children with some skeezy looking dude who's in and out of jail. Breaks my heart when I see her. So much potential to end up flipping burgers. I always wonder where it went wrong for her. 9 times out of 10, shitty home life. Just finally got to her. Found someone who loved her like she wasn't at home and got pregnant. A former student of mine grew up in an ultra-conservative Christian home. He and his siblings were never allowed to socialize with other students during lunch and recess. Whenever they had free time at school, they had to read their Bibles. In science class, they were forbidden to learn about evolution. Every essay, short story, personal narrative, and poem he wrote for me involved some kind of Christian theme. When he graduated, he immediately enrolled in a big seminary in our area, and that was the last I heard of him until his class invited me to their 10-year reunion. This same kid showed up with sleeve tattoos, piercings everywhere, slamming beer after beer after beer and smoking like a locomotive. When I asked what he was doing now, he responded he currently was a bouncer at a strip club. I'd like to sit down and talk to that guy and hear his story. Sounds like he went on quite a journey. Do teachers get to go to high school reunions? That seems like a recipe for finding out if the English teacher really did have a dolphin tramp stamp. There are no formal rules. I went to high school in Venezuela. I left the country when I was 17 and never saw any of them until what you might call a virtual reunion on Facebook a few years back. The reason I got to even know they had a group, the guy everyone knew bullied me, was shot and killed by his best friend at the time. Apparently he kept being a bastard after graduating, and thus that was the end result. Besides that, most of my classmates moved from the country due to the crisis. Those who stayed are having a bad time, like everyone else in the country. It is weird seeing them in Facebook in random countries and doing things which I would never expect from them as a teen. One is a cook in Sweden, other is an MMA fighter in California, one is an accountant in Australia. Plenty have middle class lives in other South American countries. Simply interesting. There was a guy who was the stereotypical jock in high school. Very unemotional, stoic, etc. Then he went into the military and got PTSD. Now he is a hippie and psychotherapist. 180 degrees. I went to an all-girls boarding school. This one particular hostel supervisor had been working there since she was 22 and has been there for nearly 40 years, so she has definitely seen a lot. Our school's foundation day each year is attended by over 500 alumni. Some friends and I were chatting with her when this group of incredibly smart and intelligent women come up to her. After they greeted her, she told us that she never thought they would get anywhere in life. These girls were the most notorious of all the kids that she had to deal with. They chopped off a teacher's waist-length hair and stole teachers' cell phones only to bury them, put on the janitor's uniform to sneak out of school, got fake blood and put up handprints outside the rooms of 9 and 10-year-olds, decided to summon spirits in a hostel building right after a visiting academic died of a heart attack. The rest of the girls in the hostel building were so scared that the school decided to lock down the building for nearly 5 years. They also took turns to stand on top of one of the buildings with a white sheet and showed it to kids in the farthest building. That's how we got our infamous resident school ghost. They all are in their late 20s now. Great jobs abroad, but looking at them you would never think they could pull something off like that in their teens. I'm more amazed by the fact they weren't expelled from the school. A girl I used to be interested in since elementary school. We were really close friends. I'd even work for her dad when I was a kid, stuffing envelopes for him to send out to his clients. Just basic stuff that he offered us 10 cents per envelope to be a nice guy. In high school, we drifted a little bit apart, and she started dating another friend of mine who shortly after noped out of that relationship because she wanted him to make her pregnant. Fast forward a couple years after graduation, she did have children, who she then suffocated when they were 3 years old and 22 months old. Sentenced to over 40 years in jail. She was smart, pretty, and charming, and now she might never see the outside world again. Needless to say, she didn't make it to the 10-year reunion. That took a sharp turn. Former student who was a decent kid who tried, just not the brightest. Graduated, got a job at Whataburger. Got fired because he kept showing up late. His manager was his mom. I went to my 10-year reunion. Back in high school we had a kid who has Asperger's and was a little weird. He was, however, amazing at the yo-yo, having picked one up during middle school when we had that yo-yo trick assembly. After everyone else had stopped walking the dog in 8th grade, this guy was doing more and more elaborate tricks every day during lunch. He was bullied and teased, but he continued doing what he loved. So, at our 10-year reunion, people from every strata of high school popularity was there, including this guy. He was his same old self, but more confident. I asked him if he still yo-yos, and he busted out his custom-made titanium yo-yo that he said he made on a CNC lathe. He then starts to do some tricks and a large crowd gathered around. It was quite the show. He had gotten very good. When he finished, people clapped and cheered, and even the jockeys dudes from back in the day fist bumped him and told him how badass he was. The most amazing transformation was everyone else. Nobody teased him for being who he was anymore. They now admired him for being so passionate about something. I like this story, but it's still bittersweet. You get only one childhood. In high school I was pretty good friends with a guy that was a bit overweight, about 6 feet 4 inches, really smart and a bit nerdy. Lost track of him after high school but saw him at our 10-year reunion. He was the talk of the reunion. Still tall, lost all the weight and was in great shape, had long hair like Fabio and was a doctor. He showed up with a beautiful wife. He gave us his contact info and invited us to Atlanta to stay with him in his huge house. After the reunion I tried to get in touch. Contact info didn't work, and through some sleuthing I found out he was neither married nor a doctor. He was still in good shape, can't fake that, but faked everything else. I'm a middle school teacher of over 10 years, so some of my students are high school and college graduates at this point. I'm happy to say that a good number of them have reached out to me to share life stories and updates. The one student that comes to mind was confidentially suicidal from a broken home with identity issues. She came to me for help and we found spoken word poetry as an outlet for her emotions, anxiety and discovery of self-worth. She is currently returning to school to finish her associate's degree and she was the first in her family to graduate HS. I get updates from her on my birthday each year. She still writes and performs spoken word poetry in her spare time. 8 of my 438 student graduating class, 2009, have passed from opioid overdose. The reunion is this July. I graduated from a small private high school, graduating class of 12. 6 of those 12 are dead from opioid overdose, 1 from suicide, 1 from an accident. I don't think we'll be having our 10-year reunion next year. A frustrating thing as a teacher is not being able to remember all the kids you've taught. I've taught roughly 150 kids a year for 15 years, so it becomes hard to remember specific things about every student. I feel like a D-bag when a kid who really enjoyed my class comes up and asks me questions about life for the class she was in and I can't remember much about it. I've found that I usually remember high-achieving creative students or kids who were badly behaved, as I have a soft spot for these kids. Since I usually remember the badly behaved kids, I have noticed that most of them figured it out by the time they reach 30. Most have great jobs and are well adjusted. Conversely, many of the high-achieving students end up dropping out of college and are working low-wage jobs. I don't believe that high school is much of an indicator of future success. As long as you graduate high school and attempt college, how you performed in high school will not be that important. I didn't go to my 20th, but saw the list of dead people. I tried to look them up in my yearbook, but shockingly, every single one of the 7-8 people were in the no picture section, which was maybe 5% of the class. So either the yearbook cast a curse, or there's some correlation between not being able, not wanting to take a yearbook picture and dying young. At my school reunion, everyone from my class was doing as well as or better than could be expected, except for one guy. Let's call him John. At school, John was a smart kid, well-mannered, pretty quiet and taller than anyone else. We were actually pretty good friends at the time, but lost touch after a while. This was before social networks. I know he went to university to study computer science, and the last thing I heard about him was that he had gotten married and had 2 kids. Anyways, I was looking forward to seeing him and finding out what he was up to for the past 15 years, but he didn't show up. Later the teacher told us that she tried to contact him, but no one knows where he is. He left one day to go to work and never came back. No bodies have been found. He hasn't contacted his wife or sister. He simply vanished into thin air. I tried finding him online numerous times, but to no avail. I still try from time to time. I just hope he is safe and well. In my high school, they used some of the class reps as volunteers in order to organize this 10-year meeting. My at that time class master told me that a super good looking woman, she was 29 back then, I was 17, and dang, she was top 3 woman I've ever seen in my life, was one of the dirtiest students she ever had. She would not shower for days, and at some point she was out of school for a week or so because she got a really bad infection from her period and lack of showers. Also, one of the smartest guys from that generation, who went to veterinary school, was convicted for selling some sort of animals drugs to people and used some on himself. He seemed super normal, but when he spoke you could tell that there were some clicks in his brains that were not connecting at all. Losing the idea in the middle of the sentence, couldn't keep the voice at the same tone for more than 10 seconds, going from whispering to shouting and stuff. Ketamine, that is most likely the drug, used pretty commonly in veterinary medicine and oft sold on the black market. At a reunion, my English teacher told me not to be an English teacher. Then we started pounding wine, and I complimented her on her then recent publication of a romance novel. It was actually a great read. I commented that she had clearly been naughtier than I'd previously realized. Had my 10-year in the past year. Lots of people came into town. During the actual reunion there was a lot of bragging and obvious flexing. Fast forward to the end of the night and people are planning an after party. I end up going to it, and the buzz that everyone had at the primary event is replaced with sloppy drunkenness. and the previous boastfulness is replaced with them all confessing their insecurities, their health problems, their loveless marriages, that they hate their jobs and bosses. It was a bit awkward. I was at a party, late, one night, and a kid from our class, who just moved back, had came to the party in a new Cadillac. We all thought he was doing great. He left and never thought about the car twice. He had killed his elderly neighbor. That was her car. She was in the trunk when he came to that party. He was convicted and given the death penalty. What the frick? A story of how my good friend, Jay, transformed into a better human. I met Jay in high school. He was 15/16, I was 18/19. Whilst he was a lot younger then, he behaved a lot older than he was, so it never bothered me. He was a mess of a human though. By 15 he was kicked out of 3 schools, smoked weed all day every day. I believe he had run-ins with the police, but I'm not 100% sure. This went on until after I left our hometown for university. He had this gift though, the gift of the gab. For those who don't understand, he is a fantastic conversationalist. He was incredibly outgoing, handsome, think tall Danish blonde dude, and could connect with just about anyone. If we went to a party, I would send him in first for 10 minutes, then join and meet the people he met. I can't recall how much education he actually completed. I think he just finished his high school, but dropped out of college. Despite this, he managed to land a job as a business rep, or something. Business makes little sense to me, by literally walking into his interview, telling the interviewer his education didn't matter because he knew exactly how to sell crap. He got the job, and now he travels around the world for work selling his company's product. He still is a mess of a human to my own definition, but at least he seems to have found a purpose, and I am so proud of him. If he can convince the HR manager that he's a salesman, by definition he's going to be good at the job. You have been spotted by the rare flying floofer. If you comment good boy below, he won't steal your hot dogs anymore. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.